you're watching the Promethean Action weekly Saturday night class series for July 21st. Tonight, the second of a two-part series by Will Wirtz on the four-power agreement, US, Russia, China, India, and the related question of the American system of political economy. These take on special urgency now that the prospect of a second Trump administration is forcefully before us after the events of the past 8 days. So with that, let me pass it over to Will.
Thank you, Tony. I think we were talking before this webcast began about the fact that about this last 8 days. I think in a certain sense you can it's accelerated over the last 8 days, but you can in a certain sense date it back to the debate. And the thing that comes to mind is the shot that was heard all over the world, which started the American Revolution. It obviously in a different context, but it had that importance for the 7 days that shook the world, which led to the Russian Revolution. Now, I think it's just obvious that not only did President Donald Trump dodge a bullet by a minuscule amount, thanks to the grace of God, but also this nation dodged a bullet. And I also think that the world dodged a bullet because of the potential that presidency of Donald Trump has for bringing world peace and world economic development, as opposed to the current trajectory under the Biden administration. But of course, it's not just a question of President Biden. It's an entire system which has taken over the United States, with only a few exceptions, since the death of Franklin Roosevelt. In fact, there was a pamphlet that Lyndon LaRouche wrote in 1980 called An Open Dialogue with Leonid Brezhnev, in which he has one chapter which is entitled How the British East India Company Took Over the USA. And he's very specific that he's not talking about the British people taking over the USA, but rather a particular system, the Anglo-Dutch liberal or imperialistic financier system that has taken over the United States, and which we have the moral obligation and the opportunity right now to reverse in a decisive, durable manner. Now, if you look at the Republican Party platform, and this platform was very clearly adopted at the insistence of President Donald Trump, there are the key elements of this platform are really revolutionary in the sense of reviving the spirit of the American Revolution against our historical enemy, the British Empire. We fought a revolution against that empire. That empire tried to divide our nation during the Civil War by backing the Confederacy. And after the death of Roosevelt, well, you can go back further. After the assassination of McKinley, President McKinley, whom President Trump often cites, with his assassination, you had a shift in the wrong direction in the United States towards Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, that combination, which among other things resulted in the creation of the Federal Reserve System in 1913, reversing the national banking policies which had been in effect in the United States since the first national bank was established under Hamilton, but also under President George Washington back in, I think that was, I have the date somewhere here, but it was about 100 a very long time, basically 122 years before the creation of the Federal Reserve. And that national banking system was not a central bank, an independent central banking system. Federal Reserve is modeled on the Bank of England, not on the American system tradition of national banking. And then, of course, you had with the passing of Franklin Roosevelt, you had a reversal of American system policies under Truman, who was very much did the bidding of Winston Churchill. And I point to point out a few things which should make it very clear what happened. Roosevelt was committed to dismantling the cartels which had existed and contributed to World War II. That process was reversed. At Bretton Woods Conference in 1944 in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, a resolution was passed to liquidate the Bank for International Settlements based in Switzerland, which was run by Montague Norman of the Bank of England in combination with a lot of his Nazi allies. There was an American president who was a titular head, but the basic idea was that Bretton Woods resolved to liquidate it. That was reversed. Similarly, which may surprise people, Roosevelt had an agreement from Queen Wilhelmina of Netherlands that the Dutch East Indies, which is Indonesia, would gain its independence after World War II. When Roosevelt died, British brought the Dutch back in there. Similarly, in Indochina, Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, those were supposed to be independent after World War II. The French moved right back in there, which was the contributing cause to the United States involvement in the Vietnam War. Also, Roosevelt had promised Chiang Kai-shek that the British would not go back into Hong Kong, into Shanghai, and one other area of China. But as soon as Roosevelt was dead, they went right back in there. So these are just a few indications of exactly what happened after Roosevelt's death, a reversal of his policies. It took a little bit of time because he had been in office for going on 4 terms. But in fact, that's exactly what occurred. And the danger of war today is a result of that reversal of Roosevelt's policies and the ascendancy of the Anglo-Dutch financier imperial system, which came about as a result of the British and Dutch East India companies, which is something that I discussed at length in the first class. And on this war issue, I'm raising this because among the things that Donald Trump has said is that he will prevent World War III. He will end these forever wars, the war in Ukraine, the war in the Middle East. And I think it's very important for people to understand that these wars are a result of the imperial policies of the British, the Dutch, and the French, which Roosevelt was committed to reversing. Let me just quote from, this is from Randolph Churchill, what he said to Walter Lippmann the day after Winston Churchill's Iron Curtain speech in Fulton, Missouri. He said, "We'll show you, you don't understand the British Empire. Just let me tell you this, we dragged you into 2 wars and we'll drag you into a 3rd. And then compare that to what Roosevelt himself said to his son Elliot. The biggest thing was in making clear to Stalin that the United States and Great Britain were not allied in one common bloc against the Soviet Union. I think we've got rid of that idea once and for all. I hope so. The one thing that could upset the apple cart after the war is if the world is divided again, Russia against England and us. That's our big job now. It'll be our big job tomorrow too. I'm talking about another war, Elliot, I'm talking about what will happen to our world if after this war, we allow millions of people to slide back into the same semi-slavery. Don't think for a moment, Elliot, that Americans would be dying in the Pacific tonight if it hadn't been for the short-sighted greed of the French and the British and the Dutch. Shall we allow them to do it all over again? When we've won the war, I will work with all my might and main to see to it that the United States is not wheedled into the position of accepting any plan that will further France's imperialistic ambitions or that will aid or abet the British Empire in its imperial ambitions. And that is fundamentally the issue before us today. And let me just highlight a few of the things in the platform, which I think are especially important, not to diminish the importance of other aspects of the platform. One among the things that it calls for are, one, as I said, preventing World War III. Two, stopping outsourcing and turning the US into a manufacturing superpower. Three, keeping the US dollar as the world's reserve currency. Four, terminating the Green New Deal. Five, unleashing energy production, including nuclear power. Six, passing the Trump Reciprocal Trade Act, as opposed to free trade pacts. And seven, sending American astronauts back to the moon and onwards to Mars. Now, the reason that Lyndon LaRouche called for a four powers agreement between the United States, Russia, China, and India to create a new Bretton Woods is because that's the only durable way of eliminating the Anglo-Dutch financier imperial system altogether and replacing it with a world credit system as opposed to a monetary system, which would be oriented towards economic development as opposed to colonialism and a policy of unipolar imperialism. And right now we have a situation where, as is clear to everybody, we are on the verge of a World War III, and that would be a nuclear holocaust. Donald Trump has pointed to that very specifically, and I think his commitment to prevent that from happening is perhaps one of the most important aspect of his presidency. We didn't have wars when he was president, whereas we have had wars under Obama and under Biden, among others. And this is paramount that this be accomplished. Now, if you look at the other aspects of what he's called for, these are very coherent with a proposal which Lyndon LaRouche made a number of years ago, calling for basically four laws that would be necessary to revitalize the U.S. Domestic economy. And the other aspect of this, and it's related to these four laws, is defending the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. Now, on this question of the U.S. dollar, Biden's policies of sanctions have driven much of the world away from the U.S. dollar. And there's much discussion throughout the world of de-dollarization. And this began earlier, even earlier than the coup d'etat, which occurred in Ukraine in 2014 under Biden's watch, Obama and Biden's watch. But Trump is very aware of this. So in an interview in Bloomberg on July 16, he said, "Our currency is crashing and will soon no longer be the world standard, which will be our greatest defeat, frankly, in 200 years. He also said, "So what we're doing with sanctions is we're forcing everyone away from us. So I don't love sanctions." So the proposals that Lyndon LaRouche made, specifically the four laws, which I'll go through, the converting the Federal Reserve into a national banking system as we used to have, eliminating the Federal Reserve as an independent central bank, and a new Bretton Woods system. These are all designed in such a way that we will eliminate the danger of war among these four great powers, and we will have economic development throughout the world, not only in reversing the deindustrialization that's occurred in the United States through outsourcing, free trade, and the green ideology, but we will do this on a global scale, eliminating all of the places all over the world where there's danger of wars breaking out, dangers of terrorism, and so forth. And these are the elements of what I want to go through today as reflecting the American system of political economy as opposed to the Anglo-Dutch imperial system. And let me just, Tony, could you put the picture of my book up, please?
Yeah, just a moment. So,
all right, this is a book that I wrote last year, Beware the British East India Company. As I indicated in the class last week, that title is inspired by a letter on the tea tax, which John Dickinson wrote. And his letter ended by saying that the watchman should say, beware the East India Company when they made their rounds. And the book calls for an alliance between the USA, Russia, China, and India to finally defeat the British Empire. And can you show us, this and the next book I'm going to show you are both available on Amazon.com. This book was published in 2018. The preface is a speech which I gave on entitled Franklin Roosevelt, The Forgotten Man, and it goes through Lyndon LaRouche's, the history of Lyndon LaRouche's proposal for a new Bretton Woods system initiated by the four powers. And the irony of the title, The Forgotten Man, is sometimes lost on people because, of course, Roosevelt, like the current Republican platform, is dedicated to the forgotten men and women of America. This was a phrase that was put forward by Roosevelt. But my additional meaning was that Roosevelt himself is the forgotten man. People have forgotten what he actually stood for. Many of his proposals, or his policies, the New Deal, the Good Neighbor policy, the Manhattan program to develop at that time the nuclear bomb, which then could be used for peaceful purposes afterwards. Glass-Steagall, all of these are usually have been misappropriated by a lot of people in order to argue for just the opposite of Roosevelt's policies, for a policy of green ideology. Now, what I want to and this question of the dollar, let me just indicate that Lyndon LaRouche also stressed the importance of the new Bretton Woods system in order to ensure that we keep the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency. In March of 2005, he wrote that only actions which stabilize the U.S. dollar's unevadable present role as presently denominated world reserve currency could avert the threatened plunge of the planet into a global catastrophe comparable to Europe's 14th century New Dark Age. And he later wrote that it is only through the recapture of the political leadership of the U.S. by forces dedicated to Roosevelt's legacy of the original Bretton Woods system that the worldwide behavior of the U.S. dollar can be brought into conformity with the kind of required reform on which long-term stability of fungible forms of debt capital can be organized for the planet as a whole. So Lyndon LaRouche was concerned going back quite some time with defending the dollar's role as a reserve currency. And he put forward the policies which are necessary to ensure that the dollar is actually kept as a world reserve currency. And of course, throughout the world, as I indicated right now, there are massive moves for de-dollarization brought about primarily, although not exclusively, by the sanctions policy that's been imposed by especially the Biden administration, and which I think President Trump would undoubtedly reverse, since he says he has no love for sanctions and we're driving people away from us. Now, in terms of the four laws, let me just say that these four laws were in a certain sense modeled on the writings of Alexander Hamilton. The first proposal is to reenact Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall was a legislation introduced in the 1930s in the time of the Great Depression, which made a distinction between investment in productive areas, which investments would be protected, versus investments in pure speculation, which would not. The federal government had no obligation to protect investments in speculative investment. Of course, this was exactly what was done, for instance, in 2008. The Federal Reserve intervened just to protect speculative investment, and certainly not to invest in real production. So the basic idea is to return to Glass-Steagall. In 2016, return to Glass-Steagall was in both the Republican and Democratic party platforms. And President Donald Trump came out explicitly for Glass-Steagall. So that is one measure which is crucial to bring about, so that we don't have what happened in 2008 ever occurring once again. The second area is a return to a credit policy in the form of national banking. Alexander Hamilton was the founder of the first national bank, which was chartered for 20 years. He defended its constitutionality against Thomas Jefferson, who argued against it. George Washington supported Alexander Hamilton. This bank was extraordinary. Because as opposed to the Federal Reserve, which does not provide credit for production, doesn't provide credit for anything. It bails out banks. It sets interest rates, and that's basically what they do. They don't enhance the economy in one iota. So the idea is to go to a credit policy such as the First National Bank. There was a second national bank, but it was Andrew Jackson who vetoed the rechartering of that second national bank. And after that was done, there hasn't been another national bank since the second national bank was allowed to lapse. Abraham Lincoln, who was an advocate of the American system of political economy, introduced the greenback policy. The Treasury was able to issue U.S. notes to fund the Union and its manufacturing. That policy continued beyond Lincoln's assassination through McKinley, but after, as I indicated earlier, after McKinley's assassination, you had the creation of the U.S. Federal Reserve System. What Roosevelt did is that he used the two things. He had the Glass-Steagall, but he also issued credit through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. And I'll come back to this because this is very important. So this is the second thing, second of the two laws, introduce a credit policy. President Trump has used primarily two tactics to increase investment in production. One of those is protectionism, which is absolutely valid. It's an American system policy advocated from by Alexander Hamilton, by Lincoln, by McKinley, and so forth. So that's one area. The other area is lowering taxes, and that's also valid. It's something, for instance, that even John F. Kennedy did. He lowered taxes, but there's one thing which we would certainly want President Trump to consider, which is John F. Kennedy's tax incentive program, where he lowered the taxes for those who invest in real production, while maintaining the tax level for those who don't. So you, in fact, it's a tax incentive to increase manufacturing, investment in manufacturing. So the third law of that Lyndon LaRouche advocated is to ensure that we define productive, the word productive, scientifically. What we need to do is to invest in the capital goods sector of the economy, and the machine tool, basically machine tool production, and infrastructure in mining, agriculture, capital goods that will enhance agricultural production, will enhance mining activity, and so forth. And the basic idea here is that this is quite in contrast to the Green New Deal, which does not make such a distinction, or to the Keynesian policy, which is it doesn't matter whether it's productive or non-productive. All you have to do is have money flowing and people consuming. There's the old story about John Maynard Keynes, who said you could hire some people to dig a hole and put garbage in it, and then somebody else to take the soil away. And as long as you're paying, both, it doesn't matter whether they're doing anything productive. It just increases consumption. That's the wrong idea. There must be a rigorous definition of productive. The investment, for instance, in energy must be in those forms of energy which have increasing rates of energy flux density. That is not only fossil fuels, but then nuclear fission, and the Republican platform calls for nuclear fission, but also, as we'll see, the fourth law calls for nuclear fusion, which is the energy which we see in the sun, where instead of the splitting of atomic particles, you have a fusion, and this is the future. So the fourth of the laws does in fact call for fusion, and by implication, space exploration. For instance, on the moon, there's an abundance of helium-3, which is one of the best sources for nuclear fusion. So you could get helium-3 from the moon through a space program. And of course, President Trump has called for going back to the moon and then also going to Mars. And so these are the advanced frontiers of technology. If you focus on them, then you're increasing the productivity of the economy as a whole. The issue here is not just to invest in already existing states of industry, but rather to advance in terms of energy. And we're talking about increasing rates of energy flux density. Overall, we're talking about investments which increase the potential relative population density of the population as a whole. And that means increasing the mental powers of the population as a whole, skill levels, education levels, and so forth. This is something which, for instance, the American system economist Friedrich List called capital of the mind. That's our best investment in capital of the mind. Now, so those are the four laws which Lyndon LaRouche has called for. And you see, President Trump wants to make this country again a manufacturing superpower. To do that, you have to focus on capital goods production, and on nuclear fission, nuclear fusion, and also space exploration, those areas. of the economy. It is well known that for the money invested in the Apollo program, for instance, under President Kennedy, resulted in a significant payback to the civilian economy as a whole, and that's the way this will work as well. Now, in terms of the next step would then be to, and I should also say, by investing in productive areas instead of speculative, that's also important in terms of stopping inflation, which is another element of the Republican platform. If you invest in real production as opposed to speculation, you cut the inflation off right there. It's absolutely critical. Now, the next step is in fact the converting the Federal Reserve. And I will point to, I wanted to just mention again, the Hamilton's National Bank was not a bank of last resort. It like the Federal Reserve. So it did not bail out banks. It extended loans, commercial loans, for manufacturing. That's what it did, something which the Fed does not do. Something similar occurred with the Reconstruction Finance Corporation under Roosevelt. Now, what Roosevelt did is the Reconstruction Finance Corporation was actually passed into law in 1932 before Roosevelt came to power. So it was passed under Hoover, but it was something which Roosevelt transformed after he was elected. And what the Reconstruction Finance Corporation did, it was the agency that was responsible, for instance, for the electrification of the United States. It extended loans, excuse me, to the private sector to be subcontractors for the war effort, to be subcontractors for the various development projects like the TVA or the Bonneville Power Administration and so forth. There's a book by Jesse Jones who headed up the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, in which he pointed out that they spent approximately $50 billion in developing investing in developing the U.S. economy over more than a decade. There were investments in the steel industry and agriculture, mining, in all areas of manufacturing. And this is, in a certain sense, a model for a national banking system, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. Now, I just further want to indicate that if you have a national banking system and what you basically do is amend the Federal Reserve Act to make the Federal Reserve an agent of the U.S. Treasury, and you would extend the new national bank, whatever you call it, would effectively issue credit at low interest, 2 to 4%, for productive investment in the economy, and these loans would be available through the private banking system. In other words, it's not just a top-down government operation. The loans will be available to subcontractors through the private banks, who would judge the creditworthiness of an investment and would put up money of their own alongside the money coming from the federal government. Now, the importance of this is that those are loans which will be repaid, and the interest will be paid. So it's not you're not creating a deficit by doing this. In fact, you're doing something else, because by increasing the investment in real production, you're increasing the tax revenue base for the federal government, state governments, and local municipalities. So you're actually increasing revenue flow without increasing taxes, which means that you can reduce deficits which have been built up as a result of the inflationary speculative policies of others. Um, now, so that is, these are proposals which Lyndon LaRouche has made, which would be absolutely critical in supplementing what Donald Trump has already called for, and will help to actually accomplish it. The defense of the U.S. dollar and also stopping World War III on a durable basis, right, beyond just stopping the war in Ukraine or in the Middle East, you've got to look at underlying causes. That requires a new Bretton Woods system. And this is something, as I said, that Lyndon LaRouche has called for quite some time. And this system would be based upon, excuse me, based upon American system methods. It would be a credit system. For instance, do you know that under the Reconstruction Finance Corporation with under Roosevelt, the Export-Import Bank was created, and the Export-Import Bank made credit available. I'll give you two projects that they made credit available internationally. One was the Inter-American Highway, which ran from Alaska down to Chile, and the loans, some of the loans just went to companies like Caterpillar for the equipment that's necessary to actually build the highway. So these were credit arrangements which actually increased the productivity of all of all of the Western Hemisphere, and also resulted in credit going to U.S. companies, among others. And of course, what you can do here is the U.S. companies can then export capital goods for such projects. The other project was the Burma Road, a 717-mile road from Burma to China to supply materials to the Chinese in their defense against the Japanese invasion. So that was funded by the Export-Import Bank under the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. So the fact of the matter is that under Roosevelt, credit was extended through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation domestically to enhance manufacturing, and also internationally, in this case, for two major highway projects, one in Asia, one throughout Ibero-America. And that's, in a certain sense, a model for what you could do. Now, the Bretton Woods was created in the year 2000. I'm sorry, in the year 1944, at a conference in New Hampshire. The model for the Bretton Woods Agreement was an Inter-American Bank, which was never actually implemented. Let me just it didn't pass the Congress, so it didn't actually get implemented. But I'm just seeing where I have this here. This was in 1939, 1940. And it all should be pointed out that Mexico played a very critical role in the formation of the new Bretton Woods system. At any rate, here are some of the principles of that bank, which were then carried over into the new Bretton Woods. Facilitate the prudent investment of funds to stimulate the full productive use of capital and credit. Promote the development of industry, public utilities, mining, agriculture, commerce, and finance in the Western Hemisphere. Encourage and promote research in the technology of agriculture, industry, public utilities, mining, and commerce. So a lot of these were, as I said, were taken up in the new Bretton Woods draft, which was written in prior then to 1944, starting in like around 1942. And what the draft of the original Bretton Woods said is the lesson that must be learned is that prosperous neighbors are the best neighbors, that a higher standard of living in one country begets higher standards in others, and that a high level of trade and business is most easily attained when generously and widely shared. It also said that the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development would be involved in provision of long-term capital for desirable productive projects. The interest rate of loans could not be excessive, and a loan could not be for the purpose of repayment of an old loan. This, of course, is what the IMF did. They would extend a credit if you agreed to destroying your economy through austerity conditions, and the credit would only be used to refinance an old loan at usurious interest rates. This was outlawed in Bretton Woods. You could not use a loan to repay an old loan. It had to go into productive investment. Also, Bretton Woods defended tariffs. The draft defended tariff protection, stating that the assumptions that underlie free trade theory were not valid and unreal and unsound. So that just gives you an idea of what the original Bretton Woods was like. Now, I'm going to try to bring this to a conclusion right now, but in August of 2018, at the time I was president of the Schiller Institute, which I resigned from about 6 months later, because these policies were not acted on. But I wrote a letter, which was then sent to President Trump, President Putin, President Xi, and Prime Minister Modi, calling for these 4 countries to initiate a new Bretton Woods and laying out the principles for that. A version of that letter, an open version of that letter, is the 12th chapter of my book, Beware the British East India Company. And the basic idea here is that, listen, there are, as a result of globalization, deindustrialization, zero growth ideology, free trade ideology, there are all sorts of inequities which exist in the world today. And particularly, for instance, between the United States and China in terms of trade. These can be resolved through a new Bretton Woods agreement. And it's also the case that those who are pushing for de-dollarization in the BRICS are very much committed to green ideology. So that 40% of the investment of the new development bank of the BRICS is involved in renewable energy investments. Many of them are also entertaining, as an alternative to the dollar, a Keynesian super sovereign currency, which is precisely what Roosevelt rejected at the Bretton Woods Conference. So if you get rid of the green ideology, if you get rid of the World Trade Organization, which imposes free trade policies of Adam Smith, as opposed to the American system, and you have a new Bretton Woods system based on respect for national sovereignty, and you strengthen the dollar as the international reserve currency by removing political sanctions, which are destroying the dollar, and destroying cooperation internationally. And then you move to return to a fixed exchange rate, which is based upon a gold reserve system, a parity price of gold. Then you make sure that investment is in productive areas, and this is credit that's being extended. And you also insist that all of the participating nations be sovereign nations, and that they also have their own national banking system, as we must have in the United States. Then you have a completely different system of cooperation, a community of principle among sovereign nation states on a global scale, which allows for each nation to be perfectly sovereign and at the same time to cooperate with other sovereign nations to the benefit of all. That is the actual durable basis for world peace and for increases in the rate of potential relative population density of the world's population. It allows for us to look at a future in which we explore space, we colonize space. Man, as Krafft Ericke, a German space pioneer, once said, has an extraterritorial imperative. We have an imperative as created human beings in the image of the Creator to not just stay on the planet Earth, but to develop the universe. And that's the future that we have. And I'm confident that if these ideas are widely circulated, both in the United States and abroad, that under these global circumstances right now, under the changes which have occurred since, especially in the United States, since the debate and since the assassination attempt against President Donald Trump, that these ideas have a chance to be implemented. These are ideas which you would otherwise have said could not possibly be implemented. It'd be impossible. But again, as I think even Donald Trump recently said, the impossible is something which you have to challenge yourself to accomplish. So I'll just end there.
Thank you so much.